cordially to the October Gallery, and a special welcome to the magical Romuald Hazoumè. Romuald Hazoumè has become a great teacher for me. He takes a stance. If you want to develop character, you develop your stance. Where do you stand on any given subject? For this, you gain respect, and there's no artistic compromise. Many of you here are artists, and you know very well of which I speak. In my 44 years of working with artists, I've learned that the great artists take difficult stances, and they will not compromise on their work, how it is hung, in what context it is shown, and how it is hung. Here at October Gallery, we learn that we specialize in difficult artists. It is because we are also very difficult.
Yes.
We're quite difficult about the kind of work we show on the walls, about how it is hung. Ask anyone who works with Elisabeth Lalouschek, Brian, about the words that are spoken or written about the work. Ask Jessie. About how publications are produced. Ask anyone who works with Stephanie or on the design with Johnny, and I could go on with all my staff. We're all very difficult. But at the same time, we can truly celebrate and make fun. And we are doing that tonight in Carnival. We're here to make merry in spite of what's going on around us. We're here to laugh. We're here to feast and to dance. And Romuald is the great inspirer of all this Carnival.
Our great friend Romuald. I followed the creation of these masks for some time and their travels through Paris and London. Their arrival at the gallery and the different lights they can be seen in. And magically tonight, they seem to have taken on a special life. I keep wandering around the room and I ask myself, why do you look so different? Is it because Romuald gave them the final touches this morning? He touched them with his hands? Is it because the daylight has disappeared? Whatever it is, they all seem to be particularly alive tonight. I was particularly alive when I first met Romuald in Düsseldorf, in the street, in 2004. This was a wonderful encounter. I think Chili was with me and Romuald was with a couple of friends. And it was at the time of the big show Africa Remix in Düsseldorf. And ever since this meeting, I've had the opportunity to travel with Romuald to many different places. Romuald is an RA, a messenger, so he brings the message of his works to all around the world. And I found myself with Romuald in Kyoto, in New York, in different places in Europe. I traveled with him all around England, Bristol, Hull, Newcastle, all cities I hadn't experienced before. And for that I'm extraordinarily grateful. Now this is Romuald's 5th exhibition at the October Gallery. The first exhibition we did in 2005 was called Article 14, which was an extraordinary, it was a carriage that we had in the middle of the room that was carrying objects collected all around London. So we had a huge collection point here of different objects that were all placed on this cart. And everybody participated. It was a very participatory exhibition, which then also traveled. We traveled to Liverpool and we traveled to different places. Manchester. The second exhibition was made in Porto Novo. We had a jazz band in the corner that was making music with the sounds of food and motorcycles. And it was really a great presence in this room, and it's gone on to Toledo Museum. The next exhibition was Cargoland, which took place at the Olympics in London. And Romuald brought And really was he rolled around the canisters that the motorcyclists carry with illegal petrol from Nigeria to Benin, and he made these wonderful objects called water cargo, petrol cargo, that were standing in this room. His last show was all in the same boat, which was about migration. A beautiful, large-scale boat was sitting right in the middle of this room, and another figure of Moti was standing right next to it. So these are all great moments to remember. And now we're here in Carnival. Carnival is all our masks, all our people, and the revenants in the next room. I'm now letting go of this, and I'm asking Chile to introduce Chris Spring.
Bravo.
So I'm going to introduce a very dear friend to open this exhibition, Chris Spring. Chris Spring is himself a practicing artist and a writer about the arts of Africa, including the celebrated African textiles today and Ngafa Africa, and continues to bring out new writing in this field. His first novel has just been published, and it's just out. It's called Ted and Terry. Chris has had a vision, a new vision for the British Museum when he became the keeper, the curator of all the African galleries. He decided to introduce contemporary art to be juxtaposed against older works. And there he was as curator for many years in the African collection. And while he was there, he was thinking of how to celebrate the bicentenary of the abolition, I'm twisted tongue tonight, and thinking how the bicentenary of the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade might be best commemorated. And he became aware for the first time of not only of the details of the trade, but of the breadth and depth of the psychological legacy it had left. He was a driving force in the purchase and consequent UK tour of the sculpture called La Bouche du Roi by Romuald Hazoumè, and called it a profound meditation on human greed and exploitation. Chris is also ambassador for the Africa Center and a trustee of October Gallery. Chris.
I'm getting old. Great. Thank you very much to Romuald. I can't begin to tell you how great it is to be back here in the October Gallery with my old friend Romuald Hazoumè, and to be surrounded again by his mask, Bidon. Wow, title of the show, Carnival. You know, that's a big celebration in some ways, but it's also a time of reckoning for those people who think they're going to get away with murder, but they're not. They're going to be confronted here, and they're going to be confronted by Romuald. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So, you know, in many ways, this is a rogues gallery. But there are some good people here too, and I'll talk a little bit about them. And like all good works of art, although Romuald says that mainly these rogues are African, I think like great works of art, they can be interpreted in many different ways. And I think you may well find, you know, that you're staring at Boris or Jacob or Dominic or some of these other villains who've been steering the UK towards the rocks in the last few years. In some ways, the key mask is over there with the black plastic and the red. It's called Africois, which you can see, and it's key to the show in a sense because it's asking that question: what is Africa? L'Afrique c'est quoi? What is Africa, and how did we get into this state? Now, Romuald tries to answer some of these questions through these different masks in his carnival. Some are politicians and heads of state who may either be cunning, smooth talkers or complete blithering idiots like this Blaireau here, who's got a he's got his headdress made of shaving brushes. And the connection, blaireau, means a badger in French. I never knew it was such a term of abuse. It's not like our friendly Brock the Badger, Brock the British Badger. I'm going to keep that in my locker next time I go to France. Anyway, the first time I saw Romuald's work, Elisabeth and Chili, I think, mentioned it. It was called Article 14. And as you were saying, it was a handcart, the kind of handcart you'll find anywhere in southern Benin. But this time it was covered with the detritus of kind of British society. Children had collected all sorts of things. Football shirt, cricket bat, I'm a great fan of cricket, and cricket gloves, mobile phones, everything you can imagine. And the title comes from an unwritten element of not just African constitutions, but constitutions around the world. Essentially, it's débris toi-même, which kind of loosely translates as you've got to look after yourself, but nobody else is going to do that. And does that kind of remind you of something? Or are you feeling that wealth trickling down? I certainly am. Those fat cats up above, they may be sweating, but they're not trickling. Anyway, right in the center of that handcart, there was something very strange. A face peered out at me from all this jumble, a reddish-brown face made from the top of a plastic petrol can. Then over at the desk here at the October Gallery, I saw similar faces, and I opened up this book, and I really gasped at what I saw. Because there on the surface of Romuald's studio in Porto Novo was an enormous installation that was based on that famous abolitionist image of the Brooks, the Liverpool slave ship. It was Lalouschek. Romuald I met the following year. It was a very hot day in July, and these crates arrived carrying Lalouschek, all 300 plus elements of it, and they arrived in the courtyard of the October Gallery. And they come from Musée Quai Branly, and Romuald and I opened them, and we took them, each individual mask, up the steps to the theatre. And as we did that, Romuald told me about his people. I got to know about his people. A lot of these people are not his people. That these masks in Lalouschek were mainly his people. And it was a great way of getting to know Romuald, getting to know his work, and getting to know those people that he loves, and some of whom he really despises. I also realized for the first time that the film that went with this amazing work, showing hazardous trade and black market petrol between Nigeria and Benin, did not represent, as I had first thought, a kind of modern-day slavery. In fact, it was the reverse of that. By risking their lives and tapping into these oil pipelines, these people from Benin were taking back some of Africa's raw materials, claiming some of it back. It was a kind of resistance, and that was a big, big theme in that bicentenary. A theme I think that the government missed when they tried to make it a kind of Wilberfest, Wilberforce and nothing else. And Romuald's work was so important in that respect. And this raw material, both in terms of human people and literal raw materials, has been extracted from Africa for many, many centuries. So I could see this as a really powerful work. And we took it up to the theatre, assembled it there. The Art Fund gave us some money, and Lalouschek became a work in the British Museum, and it was remarkable. It opened on the 25th of March 2007, during what we called a day of resistance and remembrance at the British Museum, and it commemorated the bicentenary of the abolition of the African slave trade. The day after the opening, a BBC senior producer, who's now a professor at Middlesex University, Pam Fraser-Solomon, she emailed me to say, I am a regular visitor to the Tate Modern, and yet Lalouschek is the best example of the global importance of contemporary art that I have ever witnessed. And that is some compliment. Ironically, Romuald and I went to talk about his work, and Lalouschek in particular, at Tate Modern. And at question time, following our discussion, a young curator from Tate Modern got up and said, in a slightly incredulous voice, "Why is Lalouschek the British Museum rather than at Tate Modern?" And Romuald, who was wearing his wonderful Yoruba regalia, got up and said, "Because the British Museum is avant-garde." I've heard the British Museum described in many ways. Avant-garde is not normally wonderful. But actually, thanks to Romuald and thanks to Lalouschek, for that one moment at least, it was avant-garde. And it was a really important moment because it was also making a very good critique, I think, of the British Museum, possibly in general, but particularly of an Enlightenment gallery which opened at the same time. And it kind of made the point that that period of Enlightenment in Europe was also the period of enslavement for many, many millions of African people. In Lalouschek, Romuald literally let his people speak for themselves. And here in his Carnival, there are other masks which give voice to those who have every right to speak, but are very rarely given the chance. For example, No Man's Land, which is down there on the last one on the right there, represents all those peoples who, whether pastoralists in Africa or indigenous people in the Amazon rainforest, have had their lives disrupted through exploitation of natural resources and are forced sometimes to rebel and take up arms for their human right to live. Yet there are also masks in the Carnival which represent the wonderful artistry which is part of the human condition in Africa and around the world. One mask celebrates Roski de Palma, I think it's in the other room, the actress and muse of the film director Almodovar, while right behind me, Kind of Blue celebrates the artistry of Miles Davis, and in particular his famous 1959 album of the same name. When the whole world slips out of joint, declared Romuald, only the jazz musicians' deliberately offbeat blue notes can hold out against the rising tide and open up a space where a note of tenderness or a hint of beauty can appear. That said, I can hear Miles Davis's horn blowing gently in my ear and telling me that this speech has gone on far too long, and that I should conclude not with the silvery tongue of a politician, but with the voice of an artist, by saying that it gives me huge pleasure to declare this exhibition open, and to thank Romuald, to thank the October Gallery, and hope you have a great evening. All of us.
Ici, oui, j'ai besoin de toi parce que tout ce qui a été dit a vraiment touché mon cœur. Donc je suis tout. Donc l'anglais, je vais oublier l'anglais ce soir, je vais parler en français.
So tonight he doesn't want to speak in English, but he's saying that everything that he's heard so far in English has really touched him in that heart.
Voilà. Donc je veux remercier tous ceux qui sont là ce soir d'être venus me voir, moi.
So first I just want to thank everyone individually in the room who's come here to see me,
Oui,
to see us.
parce que dans les pièces qui sont là, c'est moi qui suis dehors.
Because in these pieces, that's where I am, in the pieces themselves.
Et puis, il y a une femme qui m'a dit tout à l'heure, j'aime beaucoup votre travail, ça veut dire qu'elle m'aime. Ça veut dire qu'elle m'aime. Et moi aussi, je l'aime. C'est pour ça qu'elle est venue me voir ce soir.
So he said that a lady came up to him earlier and said, I love your pieces. And he said, well, that means that you love me, and I love you too.
Parce que c'est vraiment ce qui nous lie. aujourd'hui. Et c'est ce qui me lie avec ces deux dames-là et toute l'équipe. C'est une vraie histoire d'amour.
So he says it's a real story of love. He said when somebody says that to me, there's an affectation in the old sense that there's something affective that happens. He says it's the same with these two ladies here who are very close to my heart, who I love deeply.
Parce que je les aime vraiment.
Because I really love them.
Mais derrière ces dames, il y a toute une équipe que j'aime beaucoup.
But behind these two wonderful women, there's a whole team, and I know that. And I love every single one of them.
Et plus particulièrement, il y a certaines personnes parmi ces gens-là qui sont là aujourd'hui.
And there are some of those people who are here this evening.
Il y a celui qui m'a toujours donné à manger, qui est en face de moi. Il a toujours fait la cuisine. Il m'a toujours donné à manger, il a toujours partagé avec moi.
There's a man in the room who's always fed me. He's here this evening to see his works.
Il y a Stéphanie qui est derrière, qui a toujours tout traduit, qui a toujours été le lien entre plusieurs personnes et moi.
There's Stephanie over there who's always been the link between me and everybody else. She's always translated me in the best possible way.
Il y a tous les autres que je ne pouvais pas citer parce que je vais aller très très loin.
And I don't want to go on because I could go with everybody and say wonderful things about them all. Tony,
Il n'est pas là, mais il était là hier.
but he was here yesterday too. George,
Di, qui est parti,
Dee, who's gone.
à qui je rends vraiment hommage. Il y a le grand photographe qui est en face de moi, qui m'a toujours photographié.
So I'm just saying this because John is always photographing me. I hope he gets a good one.
Et vous allez remarquer que aujourd'hui, je ne parlerai pas de mon travail, je vais seulement rendre hommage aux gens qui comptent pour moi.
And so today, he said, I'm not going to talk about my work today. You just have to go and feel it yourselves. I want to talk about the people behind the book.
Il y a Chris Spring qui m'a toujours donné ce que les British m'ont apporté comme culture.
There's Chris, who for me represents something that you can't even talk about. It's British culture. He's always brought to me a very special something that I don't know, except I see it in him.
Bon, maintenant, je vais parler de quelqu'un qui a fait ma soirée hier.
And now I want to talk about somebody who made my night yesterday.
Oui, elle s'appelle Christine. Et elle est là ce soir.
Christine Ayeni, she's here.
Elle a fait ma soirée hier parce que elle m'a permis de pouvoir expliquer hier soir à un dîner une partie de mon travail à des gens qui étaient loin de comprendre exactement ce que je faisais.
So Christine, I was at a meeting yesterday, and I had to depend upon Christine, who's a great writer, because she was able to help me to explain a part of my work that most people don't understand and most people don't see. But she was the channel that allowed me to tell people who couldn't see what I was doing a little bit more about what I was about.
Et elle m'a laissé la place d'exister et de pouvoir transmettre ce que j'avais à transmettre.
So she did it in her fashion. What is meant by that is that she did it in such a way that she gave me a place where I could just be and I could just transmit. I didn't need to worry about what.
Et les grands curateurs sont comme ça.
And that's what the great curators are able to do that, to give me my place and let me do what I do.
Mais je vais profiter de cette soirée pour saluer aussi une grande pionnière qui aujourd'hui a fait l'Afrique un peu à sa manière. C'est Toria El-Glaoui.
And tonight in particular, because people are arriving for this great week of African art in London, I want to talk about one other great curator who, in her own way, has managed to give a place for Africa in this contemporary world, and that's Toria El-Glaoui.
Et Touria Eglaoui a commencé à tirer la main à quelques collectionneurs africains pour suivre et pour supporter nous, les artistes africains.
Because Touria, who is the daughter of an artist in South America, has been for some years now pulling the hands of people, collectors of African art, and collectors in Africa, and pulling their hands and grabbing them, making them move towards something that's new and special. It's different.
Oui, et quand Chili disait que j'étais difficile, elle a parfaitement raison, mais celui qui me connaît le mieux, c'est Gissi, qui a eu la plus grande difficulté à me supporter au début, parce que je suis un extraterrestre chez moi. On ne vient pas me raconter n'importe quoi. On peut être le grand blanc, le plus riche, le plus extraordinaire, le plus puissant des collectionneurs. Moi, quand on vient chez moi, on me doit le respect parce que je viens de quelque part et je sais d'où je viens. Et je profite pour te remercier. Je te rends hommage avant que je dise des bêtises.
So, when Chili said that I'm a difficult person to work with, she was absolutely correct. And the person who knows this best is standing next to me now, and that's me, he said. Because the very first time he met me, I was, well, the word difficult doesn't come into it. He said when white people come into my country, when people come to meet me, he said they owe me respect. They talk to me a certain way. And I remember the first time I met Romuald in his country at a special gathering. And I think we spent the whole evening arguing, shouting, fighting, wrestling. And it completely ruined the party because there was only me just having about I don't even remember what. And he said, so he wants to recognise me in front of his people before I start talking nonsense.
On Saturday night, I will talk about my work. At that time, if you have time, please come.
Yes,
Thank you.
We're talking here at 3 o'clock Saturday. The catalogs will be ready on Friday at 154, and you will have it also on Saturday. So please join us then.